In the chaotic world of mixed martial arts, timing is everything. One moment, you're the next man up for the world title. The momentum, the wins, the hype, all pointing toward your shot at the undisputed gold. The next, you're waking up under the bright lights of the T-Mobile Arena, filet loin stiffened by a 155-pound featherweight, and watching your title aspirations slip away in real time. That's exactly the nightmare Justin the Highlight Gaethje is living right now. Despite being one of the most exciting fighters in UFC history and riding a strong 2-fight winning streak heading into UFC 300, Justin the Highlight Gaethje was passed over when the UFC announced that Charles du Bronx would be fighting Ilia El Matador Topuria for the vacant lightweight title. And according to Jon Anik, Justin the Highlight was furious at this news, feeling betrayed, disrespected, and overlooked. But the question still remains: was Justin Gaethje actually snubbed? Or is this the harsh reality of fighting in a division that never stops moving? And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share so you can help me reach 3,000 subscribers by May. I'll deeply appreciate you, and make sure you join the official UFC Discord, link in the description. Alright, so look, was Justin Gaethje truly snubbed of a lightweight title shot? Because not too long ago, according to the boasted animal Jon Anik, Justin Gaethje seemed to think so. Anik revealed that he was with Justin the Highlight when the UFC announced the Charles du Bronx versus Ilia El Matador Topuria matchup for the vacant lightweight belt, and Gaethje was reportedly pissed at this decision. And so, you see, for me, I would have to look at it from Justin the Highlight's perspective. I mean, he was next in line for the title shot before his UFC 300 BMF clash with Max Blessed, a fight that he did take in place of waiting. I mean, he had just come off of 2 super stellar performances. A second round head kick flat loin finish over Dustin the Diamond to claim that BMF title, and a gritty decision win over Rafael Fiziev about 4 months prior. And so, to Justin, as well as his team, they sort of feel that that one loss against Max Blessed shouldn't have completely derailed Justin Gaethje's title shot dreams, especially considering that he'd already done enough in order to establish himself as a top contender prior to UFC 300. And so you see, that's kind of where things get tricky, because while Justin the Highlight was technically one of the top-ranked contenders at 155 heading into his Max Holloway bout, the reality is that getting flatline slept in such a high-profile bout, regardless of the opponent's weight class, kinda resets that momentum you were on previously. And even though Max Blessed was a featherweight mainstay, he was on his way to fighting Ilia El Matador Topuria for that 145-pound title. So beating Justin Gaethje kinda gave him an immense amount of credibility across both weight classes. That brutal knockout loss, as unfortunate as it was, severely damaged Justin the Highlight's standing in the eyes of the UFC brass as well as the public. Meanwhile, Charles du Bronx may be 2-2 in his last 4 bouts, but his recent split decision loss to Arman Tsarukyan was razor close, and he also followed it up by beating a still dangerous Michael Chandler in a technical 5-round decision masterclass. And so, in contrast to Justin the Highlight's most recent win over Rafael Fiziev, it was on short notice and against a lower-ranked opponent, it does weaken the strength of his resume just slightly. And so, that is why Ali Abdelaziz, Justin the Highlight's manager, sort of made the argument that Justin is 3-1 in his last 4 bouts, and Charles du Bronx is 2-2 in his last 4. And that Gaethje voluntarily gave up his title shot in order to entertain the fans at UFC 300. And, sure, while it is a valid point, Justin the Highlight did step up, took a risky fight, and paid the price on his own accord. No one else's. And, granted, it was a gamble, but when you get finished and flatlined in the way that he did, it kind of makes it hard to make a compelling case that you should be the one to leapfrog someone like a Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx, who at least went the distance with his last loss and arguably won. Stylistically, though, both men have fought top-tier opponents recently. Max Blessed and Rafael Fiziev for Justin Gaethje, and Arman Tsarukyan and Michael Chandler for Charles Oliveira. And, while Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx's wins may not have been as spectacular or as highlight-worthy, they came without being brutally knocked out in one of the sport's most massive events of all time. But at the end of the day, the division keeps moving, and Islam Makhachev had already cleared out most of the lightweights top 5 anyway. Beating Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx, Arman Tsarukyan, as well as a Dustin the Diamond Poirier. And now with Max Blessed seemingly making 155 his new home and taking on Dustin the Diamond for his send-off trilogy, and Arman Tsarukyan on the sidelines with UFC management issues, Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx just simply made the most sense for Ilia El Matador. That being said, though, I don't think that Justin the Highlight's path back to the title's gone just quite yet. It's just simply longer now, and I think that a fight against someone like maybe a Paddy the Baddy Pimlet, or even a matchup against an Arman Tsarukyan could put him back right into the mix. But sitting out, waiting, and bitching that you're not getting the next shot is probably not the best thing to do right now, and most likely won't get things done. It really just all depends on how the dust settles after the UFC 317 International Fight Week matchup between Ilia El Matador versus Charles do Bronx. And if Ilia Topuria wins and Justin the Highlight picks up a really big win in the meantime, then it could set up a massive BMF versus Undisputed showdown. But if Oliveira manages to take the dub here, then the UFC might pivot toward a Arman Tsarukyan matchup. Taking into consideration the closeness of their most recent clash, it really just goes to show that in this division of lightweights, timing is everything. And unfortunately for Justin the Highlight Gaethje, his timing just wasn't right. And what complicates things even further is Justin the Highlight's unique career narrative. Because, you see, he's one of those rare fighters who's consistently delivered legendary moments and spectacular knockouts, making him one of the most beloved and marketable lightweights in UFC history. And, he's fought for the undisputed gold twice before. Once against Khabib Nurmagomedov, and again against Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx, but unfortunately came up short in both times. So while he remains a fan favorite as well as a human highlight reel, there's a legitimate question about whether or not the UFC sees fresh contenders like maybe an Arman Tsarukyan or an Ilia El Matador as more appealing long-term investment pieces. Because from a business perspective, the UFC often favors fighters with momentum as well as storyline relevance. And unfortunately, getting filet-loin stiffened and sent straight into the shadow realm by a featherweight, no matter how iconic, doesn't necessarily scream next title shot. But again, there's also the politics of matchmaking to consider. Arman Tsarukyan may have a stronger case based on ranking as well as recent performances, but taking into consideration his most recent stunt by pulling out of UFC 311 due to an undisclosed back injury, it's definitely strained his relationship with the UFC and has clearly hurt his chances of receiving this opportunity for the vacant belt. Justin the Highlight, on the other hand, is far more marketable, cooperative, and consistently delivers entertaining fights. That's why his name has remained in the title conversation even after his Max Blessed loss. But Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx does have the history on his side. He is the former champion, holds records in most finishes and submissions, and has already been marketed as a known quantity in a high-profile matchup against Ilia El Matador Topuria. And so that familiarity combined with, the past performances sort of make Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx the safer promotional bet even if his recent record isn't drastically better than Justin Gaethje's. Ultimately though, Justin the Highlight Gaethje's sorta caught in a strange place right now. You know, too beloved as well as respected to be ignored, but just too damaged enough that the UFC just can't justify throwing him into another title fight without a fresh, high-quality win. And so, you see, not only us back home, but the fighters themselves must realize that the division is always evolving and evolving fast. And so with Ilia El Matador Topuria as well as Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx at the top of the marquee, and guys like an Arman Tsarukyan, a Paddy the Baddy, as well as even a Max Blessed hovering around as wild cards, Justin Gaethje may have to take one more risk in order to prove that he still belongs at the tippity top. And whether that's fighting Paddy, Arman, or even stepping in on short notice if either Charles Oliveira or Ilia Topuria falls out, then Justin the Highlight Gaethje still has a path back to gold. But to answer the initial question of the video, was Justin the Highlight Gaethje truly snubbed? Maybe not. Maybe it's just another case of bad timing, high risks, and the brutal business of the fighting game. But that's all I've got to say for this video. Let me know in the comment section below, what are your guys' thoughts on, the UFC picking Charles Oliveira over Justin Gaethje to fight Ilia Topuria for UFC 317 International Fight Week? Do you guys think he was truly snubbed of his path back to gold? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. But that about wraps up the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.